Imagine discovering on your deathbed that your entire life was a mistake. This discovery does not stem from a crime or a moral failure. It is the weight of a life lived exactly as society demanded. Ivan Ilyich Golovin is a successful man. He is a respected civil servant on a steady career trajectory, with a proper wife, with appropriate acquaintances, and a well-furnished apartment. Tolstoy provided the thesis for this state of being in a single sentence. Ivan's life was most simple and most ordinary, and therefore most terrible. This story explores the cost of building a life based entirely on someone else's definition of success, and what happens when death strips those illusions away. In 1886, Leo Tolstoy was a Russian count with a vast estate, 13 children, and worldwide fame following the completion of Anna Karenina. Beneath that success lay an internal catastrophe. Tolstoy was in such a state of anguish that he began hiding ropes and hunting guns from himself, terrified that he would choose to end his own life. In his nonfiction work, A Confession, he articulated a paralyzing question: is there any meaning in my life that will not be annihilated by the inevitability of death? He did not find an answer in philosophy or the church. He found it by observing the spiritual equanimity of Russian peasants facing mortality. The peasants did not share the sophisticated terror of the educated class because their lives were not built on a hollow social performance. Tolstoy took his own autobiographical crisis and transposed it onto a fictional bureaucrat. In Ivan Ilyich, he found a vessel to explore the same suicidal dread he felt on his own estate. Tolstoy chose to invert the chronological structure of the novella, beginning the story after Ivan Ilyich is already dead. This reveals the ultimate worth of his social legacy before we ever see him alive. The autopsy of Ivan's life takes place within the high society circles of 19th century St. Petersburg. When Ivan's colleagues read his obituary, their immediate reaction is calculation. They assess who gets promoted and how the salary shift will benefit them. At the funeral, his best friend performs perfunctory condolences while secretly resenting the time taken away from his evening card game. Ivan's widow uses the funeral to interrogate officials, attempting to extract the maximum possible state pension from her husband's death. By showing the absolute zero value of Ivan's legacy first, Tolstoy forces the reader to watch a man spend his entire life building a monument we already know is hollow. We rewind to see how that monument was built. Ivan rises through the civil service, succeeding not through genuine excellence, but by being capable, cheerful, and perfectly socially calibrated. He marries Praskovia Fyodorovna because she is well-born. It is a match made of convenience, deemed appropriate by everyone in his social circle. When the marriage becomes difficult, Ivan resolves domestic misery by pouring his energy into his career. He chooses the socially correct solution of avoidance. He decorates his new apartment with painstaking care, selecting specific items solely to signal his status and ensure his home looks exactly like every other home of his class. The physical collapse begins with an absurdity. While adjusting those very status-signaling curtains, Ivan slips from a stepladder and bruises his side. The pain worsens. Doctors perform medical authority without delivering truth, and his family performs concern while secretly waiting for him to die. The physical disease is the catalyst. The true horror is the realization that the social performance he built his life upon is the lie that is killing him. Decades later, philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre diagnosed Ivan's disease: bad faith. It is the flight from personal freedom into pre-given definitions, choosing a social role over conscious existence. Ivan deceived himself, taking the safe, predefined path at every fork. Sartre noted that this kind of self-deception requires enormous, constant psychological effort to maintain. On his deathbed, Ivan is finally stripped of the energy required to maintain the performance. He is left alone with the question of whether any of it was real. This creates the unique torture of Ivan's final days. He is dying in isolated silence, surrounded by people who refuse to acknowledge his mortality. There is one person in the apartment who does not lie: Gerasim, a young peasant servant. Gerasim offers a simple physical act of care. For hours in the dark, he holds Ivan's legs on his shoulders to ease the pain. He does not perform concern. He simply acts. When Ivan apologizes for being a burden, Gerasim answers with an uncomplicated acceptance of reality. We shall all of us die, so why should I grudge a little trouble? The illusion has been shattered. The question that remains is whether Ivan Ilyich has enough time left to truly live, even if the only choice remaining is how to die.
Ivan Ilyich possessed the perfect apartment, the correct career, and a respectable marriage. Then a minor fall while hanging curtains brings a terminal illness into his manicured world. As the illness progresses, it exposes the illusions of his polite society. His friends and colleagues treat his dying as a breach of etiquette, a disruption to their pleasant routines. Instead of confronting his pain, these educated professionals attempt to manage it. They execute their visits with rigid politeness, refusing to acknowledge the physical reality happening right in front of them. A life built entirely on social correctness offers no tools for survival. When the facade cracks, Ivan is left utterly defenseless. There is one exception in his household. Gerasim is a young peasant servant. By the standards of Ivan's elite circle, he is entirely uneducated. Yet Gerasim provides the only genuine comfort, holding Ivan's legs for hours to ease the pain, and handles the most degrading aspects of the illness without any constipated social discomfort. When Ivan apologizes for the trouble, Gerasim replies simply, "We shall all of us die, so why should I grudge a little trouble?" He states this the way one observes the weather, as a natural fact that dictates his behavior. Tolstoy embeds a sharp critique here. Practical wisdom about how to live and die bypasses formal education entirely. It emerges from the simple refusal to perform for an audience. 40 years after Tolstoy wrote the novella, the philosopher Martin Heidegger provided a precise vocabulary for what Ivan endures. Heidegger identified a state of being he called das Man, the anonymous they-self. This is the condition of living entirely by the expectations of others, doing what one does. It perfectly describes Ivan's adult life. To break the grip of das Man, Heidegger argued a person must experience being toward death. This confrontation forces a person out of the crowd and isolates them. The core of this realization is that mortality is ownmost. You cannot delegate your death. You cannot hire someone to do it for you, and no social performance will impress it. Terminal illness corners Ivan into one unassailable truth. His existence is irreducibly his own, and he alone must face its end. Stripped of his societal roles and alone in the dark, Ivan confronts a horrifying question. What if his entire life has been wrong? He audits his past. His marriage, contracted for social suitability. His career, pursued for position. His home, decorated to signal status. Every choice was correct, yet every priority was completely hollow. Contrasting with these adult performances are the indestructible memories of his youth. The specific taste of a French plum, the smell of a winter coat, his mother's hand. Small, sensory truths. He recalls rare moments in adulthood where he felt genuine emotion. He suppressed those moments, trading them away because they were inconvenient for his respectability. Authenticity is not a monument you build for the future. It is a pre-existing state of being, slowly dismantled over a lifetime by the gradual accumulation of socially acceptable surrenders. In his final hours, Ivan screams continuously for 3 days. The screaming is driven by the existential terror of falling into a black bag, a desperate resistance against the inevitable. Then his young son creeps into the room and kisses his hand. Ivan feels genuine, unselfish compassion. He stops looking at himself and focuses entirely on the boy. He tries to say, "Forgive me." What comes out of his mouth is, "Forgo, let it go." He stops resisting. He drops the performance. In that exact moment, the terror dissolves into light. The fear came from the realization that his life had been empty. Once that reality is accepted, the terror vanishes. Ivan's decorated apartment has a modern equivalent. The productivity trap replaces velvet curtains with LinkedIn achievements and digital clout. Modern palliative care research mirrors this realization.
The most common deathbed regret focuses entirely on unperformed living rather than a lack of professional success. Gerasim exists today. He works without broadcasting it, cares without branding the compassion, and shows up without documenting it. The hollow grind at 2 a.m. to achieve a status you do not even care about is the exact same trap as Ivan hanging his fatal curtains. You are building a perfect stage for a play that does not matter. Tolstoy didn't write this story for a dying Russian magistrate. He wrote it as a direct warning to you, the person watching this right now. He forces 2 questions. Is this the right life? And will I want to have done this when there is no audience left? You still have the opportunity that Ivan missed. You have the chance to answer these questions before the accumulation of social performance is complete. Subscribe if you want to explore the philosophy hidden in great literature. The choice remains: continue the performance or finally live.